Hi, my name's Lindy and welcome to my channel. My website is www.lindycowling.co.uk. My email is info@lindycowling.co.uk, and for inquiries the email address would be the one to use, please. Title of this video today is The Spouse Perspective. The spouse perspective. So what I mean by spouse, I mean the marriage partner, the boyfriend, the girlfriend, the husband, the wife, the long-term partner of somebody that has then had an awakening or is going through a process of awakening via connecting with someone else. So this would be an example. If let's give an easy example here. So a man and a woman are married, and then the man has a connection, a spiritual connection or a soul connection or a soulmate or a twin flame or a heart awakening catalyst or some other kind of connection, matching consciousness connection, come into their life that has caused havoc to take place in the mind, the energy field, and the actual personality, I guess, of the man in this example. And he is going through a vast awakening process at the same time as still being in a partnership, a marriage, a romance, living with, for example, his wife. So this can apply right across the board to anyone and everyone that has had or is going through an awakening process with someone that has connected with them on a level that is different to a current partner or a current husband and wife. Now, I have covered this subject before, but never from the spouse's perspective. And this is what makes this video different today, because I'm going to do it entirely from the married partner or the spouse or the living partner or the boyfriend and girlfriend or girlfriend perspective. So I haven't covered it from that angle before. I've always covered it from the other end of the spectrum, what it's like for a twin flame or a soulmate or a catalyst to be experiencing it while they're married. So let's look at it from the spouse perspective. And the reason I've brought this one out today is because when I see a familiar pattern playing out across the workspace, so when I'm working with particular people and I keep seeing the same pattern coming up over and over again, that sparks my interest, because I always want to know, why is that at this point in history or at this point in time, why different clients from different parts of the world can suddenly all at the same time be experiencing a certain thing. And then you need to look at that point at the global pattern and why that is. Of course, each individual client and each individual case has its own uniqueness, of course. But when there is like a pattern going on, it always sparks my interest into, okay, why is that? And this is a particular pattern that is coming up a lot, where at this point in time, the already existing marriage partner, the already existing spouse or spouses are suddenly at a point where they are wanting change themselves, and they are not entirely comfortable with the situation that they find themselves in. So what I mean by that is the husband or wife, the spouse, have noticed the change going on in their partner that is having the awakening, in their partner that's connected with a spiritual catalyst or a twin flame or a soulmate or whatever, matching consciousness connection, and the spouse has been maybe living with these changes taking place for a while, and they've suddenly got to a point where they are themselves going through a process of transformation and change in their own right. So like I say, I'm going to look at it completely and uniquely from their perspective, which I haven't done on this channel before, because the pattern has been coming up quite a lot in the last couple of months, where people that are connected with their spiritual or aspiritual or soul connection, their husband or wife that may or may not, because in some of the cases the husband or wife do not know that there is another person that has triggered this awakening, or that their husband or wife is running energy with another person or in communication with another person, although in some cases they do know because the husband or wife have told them. But in all the cases, it's like the spouses involved have reached a point all at the same time where what they're saying is enough is enough. And what they mean by enough is enough is that they are crying out within themselves for change within themselves and change within the marriage or change within the partnership. And yes, they may have noticed and been living with for a number of months or number of years their partner going through an evolutionary change, going through a process of coming into the heart or raising their consciousness, and each spouse is dealing with that accordingly. Some are very open with a dialogue in that case, especially if they know about it. Others, because they know about it, have shut down entirely, the spouse, because it's too distressing to hear that your husband or wife are dreaming about, thinking about, interacting energetically with, perhaps even meeting with, communicating with, perhaps head over heels in love with somebody else. And if you look at it from a husband or wife or partner, girlfriend, boyfriend, spouse perspective, that is excruciating for them to contend with, even if they have their own view on things and are quite broad-minded about things. If they've got an open dialogue about it and they have an awareness of their own of what's going on there, it's still a massive ask for that spouse to effectively hold space while the person that has the connection with somebody else is constantly obsessing or thinking about or dreaming about or wanting to be with or in communication with, or perhaps even being intimate with, having sexual relations with somebody else. When you look at it entirely from the spouse's perspective, that is excruciating. That is excruciating. Now, in all examples there, whether the spouse has got an open dialogue on the subject with their husband or wife that is connected with somebody else, and they've talked about it, or whether the spouse has no actual idea but has noticed changes within the other person, so they haven't been told by the other person, look, there's someone else, I think they're my soul family or my soulmate or my divine connection or a spiritual connection, whatever name we want to give it, it's all the same thing applies here. Whether they know or not, and the conversations have taken place or not, they will have noticed without question and without doubt significant shifts and changes within their partner that is going through that process. Because let's put it this way. Anyone and everyone that goes through one of those real dramatic heart awakening processes with another human being, yes, we know you can have heart awakening without it being with another human being, and in multiple other ways, which I've discussed on this channel before. But I'm talking uniquely about if the husband or wife or boyfriend or girlfriend have had an awakening or are going through an evolutionary awakening process that has been triggered by and as a result of meeting somebody else. The emotional component here is many times when one goes through something like that, one falls in love with the person that has brought about that awakening. There are many different layers to that. Part of that is just human nature. Part of that is it can become very confusing when you connect with someone that elicits huge waves of divine, beautiful, blissful love in the heart. And as a human being, that can be very confusing. Are you actually in love with that person per se, as an authentic person, as them, as their personality, as a human being? Or is there a confusion to do with the blissful heart sensations? That can be very confusing in itself. Once one has worked their way through all of that, usually people become aware whether they are actually what we as humans define, not divine, quite apt word, as being in love. So we usually, let's say we usually know. And of course, the longer the connection goes on, the more one gets kind of that clarity, no matter what the connection is or what the complications or uniqueness of that connection is. We usually, on a human level, from the human perspective, do know eventually, especially if it's not a temporary 1 or 2 night, meeting only ever in your lifetime. If it's something that's gone on, especially if it's running into years, you do get clarity on whether you do actually love that person and want to be in that person's life, or want to live with that person, or marry that person, or grow with that person, or work with that person, or be friends with that person, etc., etc. You do have clarity on that. Now, in all of these cases, just imagine what it's like for the spouse, the husband or wife, to see you or see the person that's going through this awakening and having a connection, see these changes taking place. And it's very difficult for the husband and wife because they fell in love with you before you had the connection perhaps with somebody else. Now, you might be someone watching this perhaps who would say, oh no, I was already in connection with somebody else. Well, in that case, it's slightly different because your husband or wife connected with you when you were already going through a transformational process. So in that sense, I was going to say nothing much has changed. They took you on when this was going on anyway, that evolutionary change. So it's not like suddenly the husband or wife was like this, you as their husband or wife was like this, and suddenly you went, like a lot of the cases that I've dealt with over the years of people that suddenly had an awakening just out of left field. They might have been with a partner or a marriage connection for years, and suddenly they've changed dramatically. So you can imagine what it's like from a spouse perspective when the person they fell in love with suddenly seems very different, seems obsessed by something else, and they may not realize at that moment that you're obsessing about someone else, going through huge shifts in your perception, your perspective, the way you view you and the world, coming into a process of massive change where you may be questioning again all your beliefs and all your programming. That's a massive change for a spouse to be witnessing. And of course, it brings up massive things within them. It brings up huge things within the spouse to do with their programming, to do with their belief systems. It makes them redefine who they are and what is happening in their world. And sometimes you can have the situation where a spouse is then triggered into their own awakening by the raising of frequency of the person that has the connection. Because of their close interaction with them, it can be a knock-on effect, like a row of dominoes. So the husband or wife suddenly go through a process of their own awakening. But often what we do see is that what it does is it shakes the whole ground under the feet of the husband or wife, so that they have to redefine then everything. They look at them, what state their marriage is in, or what it was like before, or where their life is going. Now that's only one level of it. Another level to this is there is a fast-paced global inner and outer change taking place, which has been building up for a very long time. I was totally aware of those changes coming right back in the early 1990s. So it's been a long time building. It hasn't suddenly just happened. It's been a long time building up, and it's been unfolding over a number of years and intensifying over a number of years. These evolutionary changes are available to everyone, and that includes your spouses, the spouses. So they are also being given the opportunity to go through an awakening. Not everybody on the planet takes those opportunities. I've said that all along, and I have plenty of evidence to back that up. Not everybody chooses to do that, never wanted to do that, don't plan to do that, and won't be doing that. Not everybody wants to ascend in the human body on this planet. But generally, the spouses involved, from the spouse perspective, they also have the opportunity, just as a human being, to go through a process to become the authentic version of them, or to go fully into their heart. And they have that choice as whether they're going to take that or not. So they are also undergoing an intense pressure, let's say outside of them, but inward. So that to the two ways there, from inner and outer, to be given the opportunity to go through a transformational process. So they are feeling that as well, and they are going through that as well. And they will be aware on some level, whether they know and you've had conversations with them about it, or they know nothing about your connection, they will have sensed it energetically for some time. They will have sensed it. Perhaps in their mind they're thinking, I wonder if he or she is having an affair. They're so different. I wonder if they're still in love with me. They will be seeing it. They will be feeling it. And like I say, the plus side of feeling some of that is if the frequency of the person with the connection is going up, then sometimes, in some cases, the husband or wife's frequency can also be activated, like you act as a catalyst on them to open them up. But, you know, I say sometimes that can happen, but it's not often that way. Often what happens is really a lot of stuff also comes up for the spouse because the whole foundations of the relationship with them is rocking, and they have an opportunity to go through a transformational process of their own. So again, why I'm bringing this video out is at the moment there seems to be a global pattern of a lot of spouses all of a sudden drawing a line in the sand and suddenly saying, I'm not liking the way things are going. I don't like the way you've changed. Some of them are actually walking out of the door, leaving after a number of years. there's a lot of this happening at the moment, and there's many reasons for that. It's because they have their own sovereign right to go through a process of transformation. A lot of them on a human level have just got, you know, got fed up with their wife or husband constantly distracted by someone else or something else, and it's very hard for them to deal with looking at the person they fell in love with and married changing so dramatically before their eyes. And sometimes they can still love the person that is transforming like that, but sometimes they feel differently about them because they're changing so much. Or sometimes it just brings up a lot of stuff within them, you know, it a lot of triggers a lot of stuff within them. It brings up a lot of polarized stuff. So there are opportunities all round. And like I say, the only reason I'm bringing this out from a spouse perspective is because this is a pattern that has been there from the beginning, but there are changes with that, in that you know, I've seen more of this now than ever before, where the spouses involved in this kind of scenario are just saying, look, I've had enough of this now. I want change. You know, if your heart lies with someone else, or going through your process, I don't know if I want to be on the perimeters of your life while you're going through that process. I might have to go and do my process. You know, there's a lot of this kind of thing going on. And, you know, I think we do need to consider the huge trauma, really, that is inflicted on the spouses in these cases, because it is very hard to be on the receiving end of that. Now, as you know, this is an experiential channel, so I don't just speak about it because I'm working with people professionally on that. It's also because I've been through the scenario as well, and I went through that scenario. Obviously, I was the one with the connection, but my then husband went through all that. And, you know, I also saw it from the other end of the perspective, because my connection's wife at the end there went through that as well. So people deal with things in a different way. I was always, because that's just, I'm like that, extremely open about things, and didn't keep things locked away. Now, this wouldn't be the right thing for other people to perhaps be very open about it, but I was. And when I was going through that process, I realized it was massive, and I actually came out of my marriage for that process. That's not the right thing for everybody. In other cases, and in the case of let's say the original twin flame, way back in 2010, his wife didn't do that, and decided to lock it down and pretend that it wasn't real, really, and did the opposite. So just pretended it wasn't real and wasn't really happening, and locked it down that way. So everybody's different, and that's a pattern again. I see all over the world. What happens is that particular scenario goes one of two ways, and I've seen this through seeing multiple examples of it now, is that people that lock it down, I'm going to go from the spouse perspective again on this video. So a spouse that locks down that their husband or wife is trying to come into their authentic being, trying to become fully conscious, and if they lock it down and pretend it hasn't happened, well, there's a lot of stuff in there. There's codependency, sometimes there's manipulation, there are control energies involved. Because this is another perspective I'm going to take here. As a spouse, I guess what I would say, and it is incredibly difficult, and I know from the human perspective, and I've lived it, so I do know. I would say if you really love somebody, and you really, really do love somebody, that you allow them to come into the fullness of who they are, not to the length that you forego your own boundaries and forego yourself for it, almost like sacrifice yourself for it. But I feel if you do love somebody, then you allow them to grow. And is it really love if you're locking something down, locking yourself down, locking a marriage down, out of fear, like I say, codependency and all the other things? Now, I don't want you to misread that I'm judging that. I'm just putting the question out there, really. These are the sort of questions that come up. It's an extremely challenging circumstance and yet a depressingly common one, phenomenally common. And spouses will behave one of two ways. They will either transform, or they will lock it down and pretend it hasn't happened, or there's been a change, like I say, lately, where spouses are suddenly saying, enough's enough, I'm fed up with this now, I want to actually find out who I am, and that's a pattern that's happening all over, and it's not surprising, really. It's not surprising, because we're going through phenomenal global change, and the biggest area of that phenomenal global change is human relationships and the relationship paradigm there. So the spouse is a human being, also being given an opportunity to go through a process. And if the process that they are trying to go through, or the transformation, isn't benefited by you that is in connection with somebody else, and they're not being enhanced by that, then they're going to have something to say about it, because they would have been picking up where your heart lies for some time, even if they didn't logically know about it or not. They will know when you are not resonating with them anymore, just like you know. And so, like I say, it's a minefield, this one. It's a minefield, but I thought it was worth, goodness, this video's gone on longer than I intended again. I thought it was worth bringing this one out, because I've never discussed it from the spouse's point of view before, on how challenging that is. You have to be almost like superhuman as a spouse to witness your partner going through an awakening and not be rattled by it. The only spouses that aren't really rattled about it are extremely well connected within themselves. They know who they are, very balanced out. But even then, it's a big ask. If you know your husband or wife is yearning for someone else, or fantasizing about someone else, or dreaming about them, or meeting them, or communicating with them, it's a massive ask. Even if you sat down and said, well, I'm going through an awakening process, it's a phenomenal ask to ask somebody else to be on the receiving end of that. And again, every single case is different. Sometimes people can go through these awakening processes but not actually be meeting the person they're awakening with, or having intimate relations with the person that they're awakening with. But in many cases, the opposite is true, and the two have fallen in love with each other by this point. So it's a real melting pot. It's a real melting pot. And to be honest, to sort of wrap this video up, I feel the spouses are drawing a line in the sand, because they have a sovereign right to come into their authentic selves, and perhaps they feel that they are being totally inauthentic where they're concerned, staying on the receiving end of that. When you look at it from a spouse's perspective, is it authentic remaining with somebody whose heart lies with someone else, or who has gone out of resonance with them? And I'm only generalizing here, but I'm just saying it from a spouse's perspective. So these are big questions that are coming up for them, and lots of those spouses that locked down those situations, that pretended there wasn't a twin flame, or pretended there wasn't a soulmate, or pretended their husband or wife wanted to marry someone else, or pretended that all this energetics weren't going on for years and all of this wasn't going on for years. A lot of those spouses at this point are getting really bit hard in the arse, quite frankly. And the reason that is happening is because they locked it down for a number of years. And now the intensity, the global intensity of that pressure of awakening is so strong that anything inauthentic that was done from a real strong control energy or codependency or very strong neediness or manipulation, or whatever ways it was, when it was done from that angle, they are now coming back to haunt people, and they're getting bitten quite hard in the backside. Because in order to come, this is from the spouse's point of view, into their authentic conscious self, they have to be true to themselves. Are they being true to themselves? Were they being true to their husband or wife? It's the spotlight falls on them as well, as it does with everyone. It's not just the spotlight falling on the people that have suddenly had this awakening and connection. It's every single scenario around them, everybody around them, and this includes their partners or spouses. So on that note, I will love you and leave you. As always, thank you for watching. Thanks for subscribing to the channel and supporting me as the channel in all the ways that you do. And I say I brought this video out today because it's a pattern I'm seeing, but I'm also getting asked questions about it. And when I see this happening, I know it's worth bringing a video out about. Lots of love to you. Thanks for watching, guys, and take care. Oh, so sunny, I can't see where to switch the video off. Bye.